Okay, we're back to Thomas Taylor's dissertation on the philosophy of Aristotle. I skipped yesterday because I was tired, so we will make up for that today. All right, chapter 10. We have just covered Aristotle's notion of motion, which, of course, its definition was the energy of that which is in capacity insofar as it is in capacity. Motion can't be either activity or passivity. Pure passivity wouldn't exist. Pure activity would be complete. So it has to be the activity of that which is in capacity insofar as it is in capacity. And so Aristotle's definition is restricted to physical motion, not just locomotion, but physical changes, because it involves the idea of incomplete activity, capacity, and it also, let's see, there was one more point I wanted to recap. It is purely passive things. That which is moved is the true motion. That which moves, insofar as it moves, it acts. The nature of Aristotle's definition kind of restricts it to that which is moved. And so bodies, even which are acting, like if you're building a house, your body is moving because your body is being moved by that which is immovable. But that which truly acts is always the unmoved. And remember, for Aristotle, as opposed to Plato, soul is unmoved. Soul is an unmoved mover. Because Aristotle's definition of motion, again, is physical, and the soul doesn't physically move. It's an intellectual energy that is the motion of souls. Plato calls it a motion. Aristotle disagrees that you should apply to higher things mundane designations because that might confuse things. Plato thinks that the analogy between mundane and higher things will actually clarify higher natures. So that's some recap, and we will go on to chapter 10. Let us now proceed to the doctrine of Aristotle concerning place, time, and a vacuum, adding what he says on each of these subjects, or rather adducing what he says on each of these subjects, and adding the elucidations of Simplicius, as being no less remarkable for their accuracy than for the perspicuity with which they are written. And this is, now that we're a ways into this text, basically one of the laziest ways to write a dissertation. He is essentially just giving Aristotle's text and then Simplicius's commentary and then a little bit of his own organization of the ideas. But essentially this text is like a condensation of Simplicius on Aristotle, which I appreciate. You know, it's still useful. All right. Of place, therefore, Aristotle thus writes in the fourth book of his Physics, quote, "What place is will become evident as follows, but let us admit concerning it such things as appear to be truly present with it essentially. First, then, we should think that place comprehends that of which it is the place, and that it is not anything of that which it contains." Comprehends that of which it is the place. Place subsumes then the objects that are in place, but it isn't the thing that occupies the space. And again, that the first place is neither less nor greater than the thing contained in it. And also that it does not desert each particular thing and is not separable from it. So there's no place waiting there for the objects that take up the place. Beside this, we should think that every place has upward and downward, and that every body naturally tends to and abides in its proper place, and that it does this either upward or downward. These things being admitted, let us survey what remains. but it is necessary that we should endeavor so to conduct the speculation that what place is may be unfolded, so that the doubts may be solved, and the things which appear to be present with place may remain, and beside this, that the cause of the difficulty and of the doubts about it may be manifest, for thus each particular will be exhibited in the most beautiful manner. In the first place, therefore, it is necessary to understand that place could not be investigated unless there were some motion according to place. For on this account we especially conceive that the heavens are in place, because they are always in motion. But of this motion, so I guess without motion, the object occupying a place and the place would be indistinguishable. So we would notice objects, but wouldn't conceive of the idea of place. But of this motion, one kind is lation, and another increase and diminution. Okay, this term lation has come up a few times. It kind of worked when I substituted relation, but the motion of a celestial object from one place to another. Local motion of celestial objects. Okay, of this motion, one kind is lation, and another increase and diminution. And actually, I think that a better translation might just be locomotion generally. But okay. For a change takes place in increase and diminution, and that which was formerly here is again transferred into the less or the greater. But with respect to things which are moved, some are essentially in energy, and others according to accident. They're accidentally in energy. And of those which are according to accident, some can be moved essentially. So those which are in energy according to accident can still be moved essentially. As for instance, the parts of the body and the helm of a ship. But others cannot be so moved, but are always moved accidentally. Okay. So the parts of a body are moved according to accident? No. Of those which are according to accident, some can be moved essentially. So the parts of the body are moved according to accident, but are essentially moved. So it is essential to the nature of the body parts that they are moved by accident. Or the helm of a ship. Others cannot be so moved, but are always moved accidentally, as for instance, whiteness and science. For these thus change their place, because that changes in which they subsist. Okay, so whiteness is not essentially of its nature motive, but the substrate causes a change. And it's not the whiteness that is essentially moved, but it is moved or changed accidentally. Same with science. Footnote 1. Once again, for these thus change their place, because that changes in which they subsist. Footnote 1. Aristotle, having previously assumed common conceptions concerning place, and taught us what kind of a definition ought to be given of it, next first reminds us what kind of things we should conceive to be properly in place, and then shows us what place is. And what was that definition, by the way? So place comprehends that which is in place, and is not anything of what is contained. I don't know if that's a real definition. Hopefully we have that made more explicit. But okay. But things which are properly in place are discovered from things which are properly moved according to place. For things properly moved according to place are also in place, since we obtain a conception of place from the transmutation of bodies. Hence we acquire the following common conceptions about place, viz., that it is different from that which is in place, that it is equal to and separable from it, and that wait, that doesn't make sense. Aristotle said that the objects in place are not separable from the place. Yeah, specifically, Also, that it does not desert each particular thing and is not separable from it. Okay. So, maybe this is just a typo and it should say not separable from it. And that it possesses the differences of upward and downward, to which there is a transition and in which there is rest. Aristotle, therefore, collects these many conceptions into the one cause of them, viz., motion according to place. He also shows what are the two species of every kind of motion according to place, i.e., lation, which is alone and perfectly motion according to place, and increase and diminution. Aristotle, therefore, wishing to discover place from things which are moved according to place, first makes a division into things which are moved essentially and things which are moved accidentally, calling also things essential in energy. Okay. We're just going to keep going. That's a little unclear, but I think we get the gist. Thus, for instance, every body is essentially moved when the whole of it, detached from everything else, passes from one place to another, as the whole of my body when I walk, and a ship when it sails. But things which are moved according to accident are such as subsist in things essentially moved, either as parts, as my hand and the helm of a ship, or as accidents, as whiteness and science. Okay. Got it. So things that are moved according to accident are in things which are essentially moved, and to be essentially moved is to move the whole of a thing. It's slightly different than the way I was trying to read Aristotle a moment ago. There is, however, a difference in these. For parts, though they are not essentially moved in consequence of being in the whole, because it is necessary that things which are essentially moved and pass from place to place should be entirely detached from everything else, yet these, when detached from the whole, may be moved essentially. And I'm having a hard time following this. We're going to read it again. Okay, there is a difference in these that is, I assume, let's see, a difference in these with, like, there's a further division of between that which is essentially moved and which is moved according to accident. I think this is all the divisions we've seen so far, so I don't know what Taylor's getting to. There is, however, a difference in these for parts, though they are not essentially moved in consequence of being in the whole, because it is necessary that things which are essentially moved and pass from place to place should be entirely detached from everything else. So parts can't be essentially moved in the same way. That was like the distinction where some things are essentially moved, but others are accidentally, and then those that are accidentally moved, some energize essentially, others accidentally, and I suppose that those that energize essentially are things that are motive in themselves, although they are parts of other things, and then the things that are moved according to accident, accidentally, whiteness and science, because they are themselves not inherently motive by their essence, like whiteness, and yet the substrate moves. Okay, so something that passes from place to place and is essentially moved should be entirely detached from everything else. So those parts, like the helm of a ship, are not, and yet these, like the helm of a ship, when detached from the whole, may be moved essentially. Fair enough. So that when they are moved together with the whole, they possess in energy the being moved according to accident, but in capacity the being moved essentially. For accidents, two things which are essentially moved cannot be moved essentially, nor do they even possess this in capacity, as for instance whiteness or science. Okay, so accidents, not parts. Two things. Whiteness is not moved in capacity. It is moved It is not essentially moved in capacity. It is accidentally moved even in capacity. It's not of its nature to be moved as whiteness. For these, when separated, are incapable of being moved, essentially. Right? Whiteness or science, because neither, in short, are they separable, but these are always thus moved and changed. Okay, so parts could be separated and then move in themselves, but accidents can never be separated. But these are always thus moved and changed, because that in which they are inherent is changed. For otherwise, they are incapable of being moved either in energy or capacity. This being the case, it is proper to investigate place from things which are essentially moved according to place, but not from things which are moved according to accident. Okay. So, after the footnote, but as we say that a thing is in the heavens as in a place, and actually I want the last sentence before this, and of those which are according to accident, some can be moved essentially, as for instance the parts of the body and the helm of a ship, but others cannot be so moved, but are always moved accidentally, as for instance whiteness and science, for these thus change their place, because that changes in which they subsist. But as we say that a thing is in the heavens as in place, because it is in air, and air is in the heavens, so we say that a thing is in air, that is, not in the whole of air, but on account of its extremity, and that which comprehends, we say that a thing is in air, because all the limits of the object are touching air, so it's in air in that sense. For if the whole... what? Oh, I see. For if the whole of air were place, and place of each particular thing, and each particular thing itself would not be equal. They appear, however, to be equal, and such is the first place in which a thing subsists. Okay, so what is this notion exactly of the first place? If the whole of air were place, and place of each particular thing, and each particular thing itself would not be equal. They appear, however, to be equal, and such is the first place in which a thing subsists. That's still not totally clear to me, so we'll just be on the lookout for clarity. When, therefore, that which contains is not divided, but continued, then a thing is said to be in it, not as in place, but as a part in the whole. Okay. Not divided. Let's see if the footnote helps a little bit. When, therefore, that which contains is not divided, but continued. 2. That is, when that which contains is continuous with that which is contained, then that which is contained is in that which contains as a part in the whole. Right. So a given volume of water in the ocean is said to be a part in the whole, and the place of it is more the whole of which it is a part. But when it is divided, so when there's a difference between that which touches the extremities of an object and the object itself versus water, a given volume of water, it's the same. So there's no division at the limit of the place. But when there is a division, then that which is contained is in the extremity of that which contains, as in place, and in this primarily. So I guess that's the first place, the place where there's a difference between the containing medium and the thing contained, apparently. Okay. When, therefore, that which contains is not divided but continued, then a thing is said to be in it, not as in place, but as a part in the whole. So that tracks. But when it is divided and touches, then it is in a certain first, which is the extremity of that which contains, and which is neither a part of the thing contained, nor greater than the interval, but equal to it. So the place is not greater than the interval occupied by the object, but equal to it. For the extremities of things that touch are in the same. So he's saying that it's not an open set, but a closed set between the last member of a containing object and the first member of the contained object. It is continuous. So therefore, the place in which a thing subsists is equal to the interval occupied by the thing. And that which is continued is not indeed moved in, but together with it. Yeah, so the part in the whole moves together with a thing. It's not moved in that thing. It's like, I don't say that my hand moves in my body, but with my body. But that which is divided is moved in it. So difference of substance between the object that's contained in the containing medium. And whether that which contains is moved, or whether it is not the less moved. So when it is divided and something moves through it, it doesn't matter if the background medium moves itself or is not. The object in it is still moved. Farther still, when it is not divided, it is said to be as a part in the whole, as for instance, sight in the eye, or the hand in the body. But when it is divided or touches, it is said to be as in place, as for instance, water in a wine vessel, or wine in an earthen vessel. For the hand is moved together with the body, and the water in the wine vessel. Hence, therefore, it is now evident what place is. For there are nearly 4 things of which it is necessary place should be one. Nearly 4 things. Okay? For it is either form or matter, or a certain interval between the extremes of a thing, or the extremes, if there is no interval beside the magnitude of the inherent body. A certain interval or space between the superficies of an object, or the extremes if there is no interval beside the magnitude of the inherent body. So we might say that interval, the space that a thing takes up, doesn't really exist. It's just the body itself. There's no space aside from the body. Like some people have tried to reduce space to like relations between objects. Space itself doesn't exist. So if there is no interval substantively, then it's just the extremes of the object in question rather than the interval that is kind of equivalent in volume to the extremes. Okay. Footnote. Footnote 3. Aristotle, says Simplicius, asserts that there are 4 things, of which it is necessary place should be one, for it is either the form of that which is in place, or the matter of that which is in place, or the interval between the extremes of that which contains, which last was the opinion of some of the ancients, as Democritus, Epicurus, and the Stoics. Some also assert that Plato conceived place to be this. Or place is the extremities of that which contains. So the extremities, like the points at which the surrounding medium touches the object that is different from it. Like the points where the wine vessel touches the wine. If, therefore, as Aristotle shows, it is no one of the 3, it is necessary that place must be the 4th. Okay, so it's not the interval, but it is the extremities of the containing medium itself. But with respect to this interval, the followers of Democritus and Epicurus say that it is a vacuum. So you need the vacuum so that things can occupy that place. And if Aristotle rejects the vacuum, then he's going to say there is no interval, it's just the extremities of the containing medium. That's what we mean by place. So as at one time to be filled with body, and at another time to be left void of it. But the Platonists and the Stoics say that this interval is indeed different from bodies, but that it always contains body, so as never to be left void. And yet we could call it an interval anyway. Simplicius adds that the word nearly used by Aristotle does not indicate an indefinite conception, but the caution of the philosopher. Since place, therefore, is neither matter nor form nor interval, it is evident that it will be the boundary of that which contains. Okay. Let's read the sentence again. For it is either form or matter, or a certain interval between the extremities of a thing, or the extremes, if there is no interval, beside the magnitude of the inherent body. But of these, it is evident that three of them cannot be place. Through containing indeed, it appears to be form, for the extremes of that which contains, and of that which is contained, are in the same, both therefore are boundaries, yet not of the same thing. But form is the boundary of the thing contained, but place of the containing body. Okay, interesting. And yet they're isomorphic, as he said before. So they are in the same space, but in one aspect, as the boundary of the contained object, it's the form. As the boundary of the containing body, then it's place. In consequence, however, of that being frequently changed, which is contained and divided, while that which contains remains, as water from a vessel, that which is between appears to be a certain interval, as if that which is changed were something beside body. Okay, because we can swap out the contained thing, that leaves the impression that there is some empty space that these bodies either occupy or don't occupy, and that's the notion of that interval, which Aristotle will reject because he rejects the vacuum. But this is not the case. But any body whatever departs among those that are transferred and are naturally adapted to touch. For that is, which are naturally adapted merely to touch and not to be united. For things which are united, as for instance air to air and water, are no longer in place, or as in place, nor as in this vessel to which they are conjoined, because then they're more like a part. Remember, with a division, then it's in place, but then with no division, it's a part in a whole. But this is not the case, but any body whatever departs among those that are transferred and are naturally adapted to touch. Any body, so he's saying any body whatever departs among those that are transferred. So the thing, like the containing, or the contents of a vessel are transferred. Any body whatever departs among those that are transferred and are naturally adapted to touch. Seems like if he's saying it's not the case, he should say that there always is some body occupying this space, but any body whatever departs among those that are transferred and are naturally adapted to touch. I wonder if there's a mistake in the text, but let's just read on and see if it makes more sense. If, however, there were any interval which is naturally adapted to abide in the same place, there would be infinite places. For water and air being transferred, all the parts affect the same thing in the whole as all the water in the vessel. All the parts affect the same thing in the whole as all the water in the vessel, for air and water being transferred. Okay, I'm not totally following this, but we're going to keep going anyway. At the same time, too, the place will be changed, so that there will be another place of place, and there will be many places together. There is not, however, another place of the part in which it can be moved. When the whole vessel is transferred, but the same place, for in that place in which they are contained, air and water and the parts of water are alternately transferred, and not in that place into which they pass, and which is a part of the place, that is, the place of the whole heavens. Okay, I really hope he goes at length here, and it looks like he does, so hopefully we have a comprehensive explanation of what was just said. Aristotle, having mentioned the circumstances which persuade us to think that space is interval, and having also added the causes of this deception, now turns to a confutation of the hypothesis, in a certain respect employing a more obscure argument. This, however, unfolded, is as follows. If place is a certain nature of interval, essentially remaining, and not subsisting in body, three absurdities will follow. There will be infinite places, and place will be changed according to place, so that place will be another place of place, and there will be many places together. But these things are impossible, and therefore place will not be an interval of this kind. The truth of this conclusion will be apparent if we suppose a vessel containing water or air, so transferred from place to place as that the water or air may be moved in it with its proper motion, fluctuating or revolving in a circle. If, therefore, the interval pervaded through the whole water, the water, says he, and the air being transferred, will make all the parts to be the same in the whole, as all the water is in the vessel. For as in the alternate mutation of bodies, when air passes into that in which there was water, we form a conception of place, as was before observed, so the parts of water alternately succeed each other in fluctuation. Each part will be in a part of the interval, that is, in place essentially, since the whole interval pervades through the whole water. For those who say that place is the boundary of that which contains, say the whole is essentially, but the parts accidentally in place, since these are not proximately comprehended by it. So I guess if the interval permeates through the body, then as things move, there will be like an infinity of places that things take up, which, if you're an atomist, doesn't seem to be an issue as much. Let's keep going with it. But those who assert that place is an interval pervading through all things, these say that there are proximate and essential places of the parts. Okay, so if it's an interval, then parts are not just parts of wholes, but they're in place as well. And that would reject the dichotomy that Aristotle drew, where when there's a division of substance, then it's in a place, and then when there's no division of substance, then it's a part in a whole. But if you suppose the interval pervades through bodies, then there's always place for even parts, I suppose. For in the interval, each part is essentially contained. Yeah, because that interval is there. Each part is essentially contained because there's a difference between the thing contained, the part, and the interval, which is that which contains. But things which are proximately in place are detached from other things, as we have before shown, and the places also are separate. Okay, so this is a little bit clearer. So if we supposed interval pervades through all things, then individual parts will be in a place in the interval. But things which are proximately in place are detached from other things, as we have shown, and the places also are separate, because it involves a discontinuity of the medium, whereas there will be an infinite number of places with the interval and any part whatsoever, and then there will be places within places, whereas I guess we should just expect places to be kind of there. Here is one place, here is another place, and they don't overlap, and they don't have this kind of infinite regress of many like micro places for parts to occupy. If therefore the parts of that which is continued are detached, as must evidently be the case if they are moved essentially, there will be infinite parts and infinite places. Yeah, okay. But Aristotle, instead of saying that the parts will no longer be continued with the whole, but will be essentially in place, says that all the parts in the whole will do that which the whole water does in the vessel. But the whole water is transferred essentially and was essentially separated in place, so that the hypothesis of the interval of place becomes the cause of the parts being essentially moved according to place and subsisting in place. Just to make it hopefully a little clearer, something being in place is determined by whether there is a discontinuity between that which contains and that which is contained. And if the interval is that space where place is, then there will always be a discontinuity between any body and it, including the parts of body. And so we'd have this infinity of places for every little bit. And I don't know what when the whole water is transferred essentially, then all the parts will do what the whole does. I don't know why that's problematic per se, but so that the hypothesis of the interval of place becomes the cause of the parts being essentially moved according to place and subsisting in place. But this becomes the cause of the parts and the places being separated. And this is the cause of the parts and the places being infinite in energy. Since, however, the present discussion is about place, Aristotle adduces the doubt of the places and not of the parts as absurd. But if places are infinite in multitude, being intervals in energy, in the vessel also there will be an infinite magnitude. The like also must be said of the infinite parts in infinite places. For the quantity, which consists of magnitudes infinite in multitude, will also be infinite in magnitude. Well, I guess this is assuming body to be infinitely divisible, and then any part, you have an infinite number of quanta making up the interval, which would be not true if we just don't suppose body to be infinitely divisible like Aristotle does. The like also must be said of the infinite parts of infinite places in infinite places, for the quantity which consists of magnitudes infinite in multitude will also be infinite in magnitude. Thus, therefore, it is concluded that there will be infinite places in the same interval, if place is interval. Right. Okay. So actually, that makes sense. There will be infinite places in the one and the same interval, because any part, and that can be cut down to infinity, will be in place because there's a separation of substance between the interval and the object. A second absurdity, so that would just destroy Aristotle's notion of the difference between a part-whole relation and a, contained-container relation. A second absurdity mentioned by Aristotle follows, viz. That at the same time, place will be changed, so that there will be some other place of place. For if the vessel which contains an interval in itself is transferred, this interval will be in the interval in which the vessel is, and thus there will be a place of place, which is absurd. Yeah, so if the interval is that place, and the interval contained in the vessel can be moved with the vessel, then there's a place of the place, which is that interval. A third absurdity likewise follows, that many places will be together. For the vessel, though a bunch of them will overlap, for the vessel being transferred, the interval which is between the boundaries of it will also be transferred. Okay? And will subsist in another equal interval, so that the things in the vessel will be in the intervals from the beginning, which were called places, and in those into which they pass when transferred. Hence, many places will subsist together with many other places of the same body. Will not, therefore, the same absurdities be consequent to the assertion that place is the extremity of that which contains? By no means, for it cannot be said that when the vessel is moved, the water will be in another place, because it's the boundary of the containing vessel, or the parts of the water, for they subsist in the same place, and not in another, as if interval were in interval. How, therefore, if the wine possesses the same place, both according to the whole and according to the parts, will it be moved from Phasis to Athens? To this we reply that it is not moved essentially, for it remains in the vessel. But the vessel which contains the wine is moved and transferred, and not the wine itself, nor its parts, except according to accident. But if place were interval, bodies would be essentially transferred together with the vessels. In a similar manner, their parts, in consequence of separately changing the interval, and they would exist in different places, but not according to accident. The place, too, of each of these would be a part of a greater, and again, the greater would be a part of a greater, and this as far as the greatest place and interval in which the universe is contained. For the authors of this hypothesis contend that there is a certain interval in which the whole world is contained, and is distributed through the whole of it, in a part of which every body is always ingenerated. For this assertion makes place to be a part of place in the same manner as it makes interval to be a part of interval. We may, however, see that those who assert place to be a certain interval in no respect differ from the amphora, that those who assert place to be a certain interval in no respect different from the amphora, the vessel, either make the wine to be moved essentially, or they must say that it remains perfectly unmoved in passing from Phasis to Athens, for they cannot be allowed to say that it is moving according to accident, because they assert that the amphora is similarly in the interval and the wine it contains, and the parts of the wine. Okay. Well, that's pretty good. That does clarify. So matter also may appear to be place if anyone directs his attention to that which is at rest. And this we will pick up next time. So a bit of a short one today, but I have an appointment at 3 and I don't want to be in the middle of a section. So we'll wrap up. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.